This episode is about minutes 11 through 15 of The Rise of Skywalker with returning guest Riley Silverman. Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, feel free to call me Xanthi, and today is all about minutes 11 through 15 of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. In this episode of the film, Poe and the gang narrowly escape a giant green space monster. I think it's called Megafauna Chasm. We also see Rey training in the jungle on Ajan Kloss under the light supervision of her new master, Leia. Kylo and Rey then have their first shared force call, and Rey reunites with Finn and Poe, whom she argues with a bit. And today's guest is Riley Silverman, returning guest and author of several Star Wars books. Hello, Riley.
Hello. Thanks for having me back, and thanks for giving me minutes that you knew that I would sink my teeth into. So
yeah, I was. I wanted to talk to you about these minutes because I feel like the Leia Rey stuff and basically like Leia as a Jedi trainer, as Jedi adjacent, force sensitive is
she caucuses as a Jedi.
There you go. Yeah.
That's my phrase for that kind of thing.
That's funny. And pretty accurate. Yeah, I feel like it's a perhaps controversial aspect of this film. And I mean, it's not, that's not why I wanted to have you on, but I knew that you could have like a nuanced conversation about it with me. And so that's why.
Well, it's a frustrating thing, right? Because I think a lot of us grew up like once we had that moment in Return of the Jedi when we were like, oh, Leia is also a force sensitive child of Darth Vader. There, like, she could have been the hope for the galaxy. And in at least one certain point of view excerpt, she's supposed to be the hope of the galaxy.
Exactly.
But I think I have been chomping at the bit my whole life to see Leia as Jedi, and we got a little bit of it in Last Jedi, and it's like this bittersweet thing of like, oh, we do finally get it in this movie, but it's so tempered by the loss of Carrie Fisher that it's like this Frankenstein version of it, and it's like with flashback scenes and CGI as opposed to like just getting to see Carrie Fisher get to be a Jedi, and that's like, I think it's like this really, it's like this weird bittersweet of like, yeah, we got it, but it's that, but not like this meme. It's like somewhere Keanu Reeves is shaking his head and going, but not like this.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because like, I think from a certain point of view, one could say that this movie confirms that Leia never fully became a Jedi because we get the explanation of how she stopped training, like the choice that she made on what to focus on in life. But here we do still see her like being called master. Still, she is training Rey. So I feel like she's Jedi enough for me personally.
Yeah, me too. I still hold to the philosophy, and this is how I feel about Ahsoka as well, of like there's two things about like there's Jedi in title, and then there's like Jedi in practice. And like Leia obviously does not spend most of her life training to use the Force the way that like a Jedi as we think of it is. But I think she does dedicate herself to the things that Jedi are supposed to like uphold and stand for and do it in her own way. And I think Ahsoka is very similar in that way. She has more formal training, obviously, but she's still a Padawan when she leaves the temple. She should have been a knight at that point, if you ask me. But yeah. she's still a Padawan. So like that whole like a lot. I don't want to get too caught up in story and dialogue here because I know this is not the point of your podcast. But like I get so vindicated whenever Dave Filoni talks about the inherent Jedi-ness of Ahsoka because there's that moment where everyone hypes on, which is the "I'm no Jedi" line. But the context of that scene, she's taunting Anakin. She's not really. She's saying like, "I will not hesitate to kill you. I'm no Jedi." That's what she's saying. But then in the same scene, she shows Jedi mercy to him the second his face mask breaks and she sees Anakin again. And I feel like coming back to this point, Leia is very similarly that. I think Leia is not. She's never been trained as a Jedi, but she has all the like morals and like she's the kind of person that a Jedi should have strived to be. And that's, I think, what makes it work for me. Like I think that she's like, she's being called master by Rey almost like as out of just like the pure respect of it, not out of like, oh, according to some weird canon rule, you're a matter.
The trial. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because like I mean, like again, not to keep using Ahsoka in this, but like Ahsoka calls Anakin master, and he's still a knight at the point in time when he's training her. So it's like I think
it's more like
I think
teacher.
the series being master. Yeah, I think when someone is your teacher of specifically of like an art like this, you do call them your master, and that's just kind of how it is. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I like to substitute the word Jedi for musician in my mind to think about it, and I think of Jedi. I'm like, that's a Jedi is a classically trained musician who has like achieved certain institutional pedigree, but there are still lots of people who aren't classically trained or maybe quit halfway through their journey or something, and they're still musicians.
Yeah. And then you got like Night Sisters, which are like riot girls and punk rock people. And then you've got...
Oh, I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like I think coming from stand-up comedy, we had a lot of that. Like there was kind of like people would say comedian, and I think like my brain would almost always assume that meant stand-up comic. But like there's lots of ways to be a comedian. Like there are sketch comics, there are comedic actors, things like that. But like for early on in my career, if I was like, oh, that person, like if someone said like that person is a comic, that to me would always mean they were a stand-up comic. Like it wouldn't mean that they were doing like sketches or writing funny things on the internet, which was like still kind of a new thing. If you said you were a comic, it meant that you had been like doing stand-up at a mic in front of an audience. And like I feel like maybe that's kind of like there's like capital J Jedi and maybe like lowercase J Jedi. I don't know.
Totally. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, this set of minutes technically we have a few seconds before we get to the Jedi bit because what we start with is the end of the lightspeed skipping scene. And I feel like let's just start right out the gate there. And I will say that it's a little, actually, before I say anything, let's listen and then I'll ask you about it. All right, here we go. Okay, that was it. It was super short. So actually, let me get into it a little bit by playing.
Can we play it one more time real quick? Even if you edit it out, but can we play it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to start from the end of the last set of minutes because it kind of runs into it. Anyway.
Yeah, just because of the bangs. Yeah,
exactly. All right.
Yeah, well, Rey's not here, is she? Last shot, maybe forever. Hold on!
So there it is.
Yeah.
Do you
Chaos.
recognize that music or any part of it?
Oh gosh, I mean, I do recognize it because a lot of the stuff is reused over and over again for motifs and themes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It does have a very. I'm trying to think. I definitely feel like I've heard it literally in the context of people being in the Falcon escaping from something, and that's like where I've heard it. But I could be wrong about that. But it does sound very familiar.
Okay, I'm gonna play something from another film.
Okay.
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
Oh wow! Wow. Well, I was technically right.
Yeah. So, Death Star.
I love John Williams. I love John Williams so much.
Well, okay. This part is a little bit controversial, actually, in the Rise of Skywalker. Okay, I don't think it's that controversial, but basically one person on YouTube did make a video where, like, this was addressed and seen as a lazy choice, actually. Well, the thing is, we don't know, like, if it was something that John Williams wrote for The Rise of Skywalker, or if editors were like, this will sound good here. And because sometimes the music editors or the editors are the ones responsible for putting in cues.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I mean, I guess this is just an open question. Like, okay, this video, it was by Sideways. He was asserting that like it was kind of lazy because it was kind of drawing on our associated feelings with hearing this. You know, it's strongly attached subconsciously to like the Death Star blowing up, and so kind of a shortcut to eliciting emotion from us in this kind of much less dramatic, like less narratively significant scene. That was the argument there.
I don't agree with that. Yeah,
right.
I mean, I feel like if that's your argument, I feel like you're kind of getting into the nitty gritty of like that's what all music does in films is like emotionally manipulate you into feeling certain things during certain scenes. Like
I think it does do that
later. Yeah, like later on in this scene, like in this film, I mean, like when the ships arrive at Exegol with the "You're Not Alone" Poe, and the ships like that music is so designed to get me to start crying, and I do every time. It's just like, but also I think from the perspective of what Kathleen Kennedy wanted this movie to be was a capper for the entire saga. So I think there is an element of like, we are opening this movie with an action sequence that, even though it's not the same event happening as the Death Star, it's evoking that feeling, and it's kind of giving you that implication of like, this has all built to this. And like, whether or not you feel that the movie successfully accomplishes that goal or that task, I do feel like that is something they're trying to do with the music. I think the music is actively trying to make you feel like, oh, this is like the culmination of all these things that you have seen before in this saga. And also, like, if you're going to start getting into, oh, wow, Star Wars reused this music from a previous point, like, you might as well stop talking about Star Wars music. Like, so everything is like, yeah. So that's my feeling on it, though, personally.
Yeah, fair enough. I feel like the reuse of old theme, the reuse of music from prior things that had a big impact sometimes feels lazy is probably not the right word, but it feels like a shortcut sometimes to me. And I won't say this isn't necessarily the case in Star Wars or the Rise of, well, it is the case often in Star Wars, but I mean, it's more so in the shows. I think it comes up more so in the shows.
Yeah.
It's I guess the musical version. It's on one hand, it's the musical version of fan service, but I think that's only counts when it's like, when the audience is aware of it. Like when Luke raises the X-Wing, and that's something I think the audience is aware of. Oh, that's like the Empire Strikes Back music when Yoda raises the X-Wing. When Luke raises the X-Wing in this movie, that's an obvious like recall. But for things that are subtle like this, where like even you who knows Star Wars so well, you're like, I know I've heard this, but it's not like, oh, that's definitely this one theme from this one spot. It's something that a lot of people might not know immediately. And I will say that in The Rise of Skywalker, it's not drawn out to the same extent that it is in A New Hope. In A New Hope, that whole thing, like what I played was really long. It was like over and over again, you know? Over and over again. And here it's really just the tail end. So it's not that much.
Yeah, I feel like the New Hope one even gets parodied sometimes. It's like, let's make it go out even. Like they make the joke of having a thing keep like something keeps zooming out, zooming out, zooming out, zooming. I've seen that done like as a joke that's referencing that exact music motif of like dun 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 dun. Like, and it's like I'm trying to think of the example in my head. I've definitely seen it where it just keeps happening. I don't think you are wrong that is a shortcut. And I think the TV shows definitely give us shortcuts more often. I think that has largely to do with the quicker turnaround they have to have for the TV shows and the amount of time they have to do it. And the lower budget being spent on the TV shows versus the feature films, you know, more than most TV shows, but still less than a film per anyway. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I necessarily think that it being a shortcut is a bad thing, because I kind of feel like I would rather a shortcut be used here or there so that then more time and energy can be focused on parts where it really matters.
That's fair.
If the whole film was this kind of stuff, I would be a little more upset about it. But I think it being just a shortcut in this moment, I'm kind of like, yeah, get to the thing and move on.
Yeah, well, I mean, a shortcut can be like a neutral description of something. Like in life, we all have certain things that we've decided to take shortcuts on because we want to spend more time on other things. So it's, just a give and take. I see it as a choice. Like I think for me, the biggest example of this is when trailers will use like a classic song, but it's like a cover of a classic song, or it's like slowed down, like some beats added to it. And that's like an obvious, it's a shortcut. It taps into people's nostalgia for whatever that song is. They're like immediately more on board with the movie being advertised or an advertisement maybe. So like that's obviously a shortcut, and obviously the advertising industry and everything, like they know it, so they use it and it's
love
effective.
That move.
But yeah, exactly. But it just is what it is. I just recognize what they're doing there.
Yeah.
So to zoom this out even further, kind of like the meme, which is an accurate representation of what this incidental leitmotif is, which is called, incidental motif. It's not a leitmotif because it's less significant than a leitmotif. It's just incidental. It's called Martial Chords. And John Williams himself, what he calls it is, because John Williams is aware of this polychordal thing, he calls it the Holst Chords. And he calls it the Holst Chords because it's borrowed directly. It's a nod to Gustav Holst, the planets, Mars. And I'll play you the part where it shows up in Mars. So it's like a reference. It all goes back to being like an homage to the planets, to Holst, which John Williams, very self-awarely lifted this from, or, referenced it to great effect. So here's from Mars. Yeah, anyway, it's the exact same chord. You can, and it's a famous chord because it's a famous chord. A polychord is like when two chords are stacked on top of each other. So in this case, it'd be like. It's like D flat stacked on top of a C, and yeah. So I guess we're continuing the A New Hope and the planets homage in Star Wars, which is very part of the original Star Wars score DNA, for sure.
I think it also works in the context of lightspeed skipping too, because it's like you're going from location to location. So it's like there's a skippingness to the music, and it's like a skippingness to what's happening with the ship. So
yeah,
and lightspeed skipping in a way is taking a lot of shortcuts, so it kind of works well. Take that argument. I'm sure that was thought of never once in the editing room, but I just in my head I'm now.
There you go. All right,
I'll make anything work. I love Star Wars that much.
So now we're going to transition. Be with me. Be with me.
They're not with me. Ugh.
Yeah, you can hear the birds so loudly. I like that. So, of course, we're on Ajan Kloss, which is a jungle. This is our introduction to the planet in the film. And I remember, like, after the just hugely chaotic lightspeed skipping scene, I remember just being like, oh, this is a nice a little time to take a breathe right now.
Yeah, it's a nice little, actually, when I listened to the audio, the minutes you sent me, I actually sat on the floor crisscross with my hands doing the Rey meditation pose while I listened to it. Yeah.
Nice.
I figured I would get into the mindset of Rey while getting into the soundscape of Rey. Yeah, speaking of hearing motifs and reused music from Star Wars, I think like that's one of the most iconic. And I think it's interesting to me that this is I didn't think about it until rewatching it now, but that this is the music being used while Rey is being introduced into the movie again, and it's also, it's used iconically in A New Hope, like with Luke looking up at the two suns, and then that ends up being the last image of Rey in the movie too. Is like that's like that shot with like those images. So it's kind of like it almost bookends Rey in the movie in a way.
Oh yeah, that's true. Like Rey with Luke. Yeah, that's a good point. And I know that a lot of people hate that.
No.
I personally love it, though.
I do too.
So Rey, like, I guess I am very gratified whenever I see like Jedi training scenes. They're like one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
So this made me very happy to see. Of course, we are hearing the Force theme, and as she kind of goes, ugh, is when we hear Rey's theme. Let's see. Let's continue playing. We hear her A theme, I would say.
Rey,
It's
be patient.
chock full of themes. So this is actually another.
Voices of the Jedi who came before.
Nothing's impossible.
Nothing's impossible. I'm gonna run the training course.
Okay, this whole thing is like motif after motif. We just had, because that, I didn't notice this when I first watched the movie, or even when I watched it the second time. I didn't notice it till I was like paying attention. But that music in the background while Leia is talking is, at least Frank Lehman names it in his catalog as as an incidental motif, and it is Leia Trains Rey is the name of it, and it's that like tender string thing. I only noticed it because then it comes up again later, and I'm like, wait, we heard that. And I was like, maybe that's a motif. And then immediately it goes back into the Force theme. It's just like one thing after another.
Yeah, it almost works as a blending of like with the Force theme, Rey's theme, and this Leia training motif. It's like it's the bits of Luke's training, the bits of Leia's training, and then like how Rey interprets that, all kind of like working together in this like little symphony.
Oh, that's a really good point, because something interesting happens after this, which I feel like it's a combination of Rey's theme and the Force theme. I'll play it.
Voices of the Jedi who came before.
Nothing's impossible.
So here.
Nothing's impossible. I'm gonna run the training course.
Like I feel like it starts like it's going to be the Force theme and ends like it's Rey's theme. That just like very brief.
And it plays well with the line that she just says about the Jedi that came before, because it plays almost like it's the Jedi that came before becoming into Rey, which is like a lot of the theme of Rey's part in this movie is like her embracing herself as the heir of the Jedi.
Yeah. Take that, heir to the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wish I could take. I cannot take credit for Heir to the Jedi. I have it on. I have a Rey lightsaber art on my wall that has Heir to the Jedi written in Arabic.
Oh, nice
lightsaber. Yeah,
nice.
I don't know if I've ever mentioned to you that I'm a big fan of Rey. I don't know if that's ever picked up to you.
Never have guessed.
No, I almost wore my.
You've cosplayed as Rey, right?
I have.
Yeah.
I've cosplayed as Rey a few times. Yeah, I walked around as Rey last year at Star Wars Night, and I'm a big fan. Yeah, I'm hoping that there's a different version of her costume for the new movie, because I just want a different Rey. I want a Rey cosplay that doesn't require me to have a bunch of white flowy garments. Like, I want something more like her outfit in Last Jedi, but I also just want her to use her yellow lightsaber more so I can run around with that and have some fun with that. Because I have so many versions of that lightsaber now. I think I have 4.
Whoa.
I have at least 3 of the yellow one. The one I want, I think I'll have a 4th one once they buy the toy one they have in the parks now, because I have the parks version of it. I have
like the fancy one.
Yeah, I have the Hasbro Black Series one, and then I also have the I have one that was like made by I think like for Ultra Sabers, like before anybody else was selling the Rey one. I got their version of it, and then, yeah, and then I also have her reforged. I had the one she has in this scene, the reforged Skywalker one that has the burn marks on it and like part of her bracelet holding it together.
Nice. So, that's awesome.
Kind of a fan.
Yeah, so Rey here is really taking in input from the Jedi who came before. I feel like, that's kind of the theme of this film, especially like at the end when, I am all the Jedi. And I like how the music
I have a shirt that says that. Not that I'm
all the Jedi. Nice. So what do you think of Leia in this moment?
I will tell you that when I divorced the video from the audio and just listened to the audio, Carrie Fisher's performance being a pre-recorded one that was inserted into the film is way more clearly at what's happening. Like it very much feels robotically inserted in a way that like I think that her like deep fake version of her doesn't like. I think there's like maybe like a trick happening with your mind because you see her there talking and like it
you're willing to
always
make the
felt.
leap.
Yeah, it always felt a little robotic watching it because it's like they were kind of doing an impossible thing. If I made this movie, I probably would have done the Black Panther thing with it and opened the movie with Leia's funeral and not made it like trying to Frankenstein her into the film. But I didn't have that power. So, but I think that they did the best they could with what they had. But I will say that when it's just audio, it's a lot more clear that they did the best they could with what they had, and it almost feels like someone like called in on a podcast. Like it has that level of like disconnect.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I'm like doing a self-tape audition and I don't have a reader, so I've like recorded my lines, and it's like the reaction time isn't quite perfect. It's kind of it's obvious that they're recorded separately. Yeah.
It's clear that Leia wasn't talking to Rey in the scene that she was like I'm pretty sure it was her talking to Han in the scene that we got like the cut scene. I think I could be wrong about that, but I think that's what happened. But
I actually misheard Rey's response in the theater, and both times I saw it in the theater. I didn't notice until like when I rewatched it this year that she says, "I'm gonna run the training course." I heard it as, okay, Leia says, "Nothing's impossible." And in my mind, in the theater, I thought Rey says, "Nothing's impossible," later on the training course. Like, it's not impossible, it's just later on the training course. And I remember being like, I really like that line. And then it turns out that's not the line, so.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I like that, though. Yeah, nothing's impossible. I just haven't trained for it yet.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, good lesson, Leia /Rey. Oh, well. Okay, so then she runs the training course. Let's hear that. Rey, chimes. Okay, we're getting so much. What does this remind you of, if anything?
I mean, I'm hearing kind of a, this is weird, but like, obviously it's Rey's theme, the like chiming part, but it almost reminds me of the Mustafar fight scene between Obi-Wan and Anakin, like that, like the sweeping element of it, like when you see them like coming in on them and they're like fighting on that, like they're kind of like, they're both vertically hanging off that building and they're like fighting with the sabers at each other. It feels kind of like that weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't, I can see that. I wasn't even thinking about that, but totally. What it reminds me of is Luke in The Last Jedi on Ahch-To. And I'll try to So this is when he's like drinking milk from the sea siren and scaling across the river. It's basically like it's definitely like a Luke doing his thing montage. Yeah, it's kind of. And I remember really loving this part in The Last Jedi. Like it kind of has a similar kind of drama, even though it's like he's not doing anything or he's not in dire danger or anything. This is his routine. He's just doing something. And similarly, Rey is training. She's not like in a real battle, but it's like a game on type of thing.
The way it's being used in this movie makes me think about recontextualizing in my mind the way it's used in Last Jedi, because which I pronounced that very strangely, but I emphasize that very strange Last Jedi. You're right, because it is just Luke's routine, and he's not really doing anything with high stakes, but it's played so epically, and he's doing such like jumping across that chasm on the sticks and stuff like that. And I almost wonder if the intent of it being so epic seeming, even though it's like mundane tasks, is meant to betray the fact that Luke isn't as disconnected from everything as he wants to be or claims to be, and he's actively training himself, like, and keeping up with his training every day, but not admitting to himself that's what he's doing. Like, he's doing his own Jedi, like, obstacle course as
that's
the
interesting.
days go on, but he's just saying, oh no, I'm just getting milk, I'm just doing this. But it's
just getting milk, but I'm gonna do it in this like ridiculous way.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that's like, and the fact that it's being used in the same way in this film, obviously, like, different people made this movie than made the last movie, so those choices are character as opposed to intentional script choices. But at the same time, it does kind of work really well that like, oh yeah, this is the training montage music, and Luke is in his training montage, even if he's not telling himself he's in a training montage.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I like to think of it. I like to think of Luke being like, "No, I'm not training at all." But then suddenly, when it comes time for him to use the Force again, he is very in shape with the Force. Like it's not like he's super out of practice.
It's like he Mr. Miyagi'd himself. Like he's like, no, I'm not training myself to do karate. I'm just washing cars and I'm just sanding floors. That's all I'm doing. That's all that's happening. But he's doing it to himself as opposed to a student. And then, yeah.
That's really smart. Now I'm like, how can I do that in my life where it feels like I'm not doing something? But yeah, okay. Must ponder this.
Yeah.
So in this training,
the best I have is using cardio, is doing Beat Saber to do cardio. So I'm like, oh, I'm just fighting things with lightsabers and I'm not getting exercise. What are you talking about?
Is that VR?
Yeah, it's a VR thing where basically there's music and you're basically holding two lightsabers and like blocks come flying at you and you have to like hit the blocks to the music. And it's one of the few things that keeps me consistently working out. And it's also great because, first of all, I get to play with lightsabers while I'm doing it, which is very fun. But also, I have found that VR workouts are the only workout in my life that I've done where I have zero dysphoria because I'm not seeing any of my body like in a mirror or anything. And so I'm not like having that disconnect of like what my body makes me think of versus like working out. I'm like just in this space and doing stuff. And so
that's really cool.
It's very fun.
Man, yeah. I've been thinking for a long time about getting into lightsaber training or something, but
I would love to do that. Yeah. Like actual, like, yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm like,
saber and
yeah, like I think there's like a group in LA that does it. Like I think there's something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, okay. Training. Gotta love the timpani.
I love this theme so much.
Oh, I love it too. Someone asked me.
So heroic and wild and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like Rey's theme, or do you mean this version of Rey's theme?
This version of her theme, but I love all Rey's themes are beautiful. I love every version of Rey's theme. I love this like really like epic version of it. It's so fun.
I agree. I think okay, so we hear a couple of Rey's themes in this. We hear the theme, which is dee 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 dee, and then we also hear the chimes theme, which is dee 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 dee, and the way that the theme is sort of punctuated by like rhythmic, it's like there are interjections of other music, I guess, like the bars are drawn out a little bit, so it sounds like a suite. It doesn't sound like just the theme is playing out. It's like it does feel like it feels like more like it's part of a set piece or something. And I like, another reason I like Jedi montage, like Jedi training scenes is often the music feels more like it has its time to shine. And we can hear, it's not like just underscore beneath dialogue. It's like we get to hear the music for a little bit, like full power. And that's another reason I liked that Luke scene in The Last Jedi, because it's like we have like a minute of like just watching Luke and this beautiful do great stuff in this cool place, and we're just like hearing awesome sounding music, and that is meant to be heard, not meant to be hidden. And that's what we're getting here. So I feel like it's a real spotlight moment. And which is why I think the the training montage in Book of Boba Fett was a real missed opportunity to have more active music, but that's just my opinion. I thought the music was way too stagnant for that kind of theme, for that kind of moment. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. There's the chimes. And then we have that key change. Did you catch that? Where it was like, it stepped up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that also happens when Luke is on Ahch-To. His new theme in The Last Jedi steps up. Sorry. There we go. Like the percussion kind of goes nicely with the lightsaber like stabs. It's like off beats, and then the violins in kind of interspersed on like 2, 3 on like beat 4. They're going. It's like dee 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 dee.
Yeah, and as almost too as Rey is starting to struggle more with her training, it feels like the music is pushing back against her in some ways. Like it's getting more intense, and like it's like she's starting to like have a harder time with it, and the music is like really weighing down on her.
Yeah, the music is one of the ways that like that is communicated to us. Like it's not just idyllic music; it's kind of showing, what's in her mind. Like I can imagine this is like the soundtrack of her training right now.
Yeah. And it's why her training is like her brain is so chaotic. She can't like connect with things right now because she's got so many thoughts happening and she's so lost that like having this kind of like cacophony of different sounds and suites kind of forming together really like plays into that.
I actually see it as like controlled chaos. Like I hear a lot of things going on, but I hear them fitting together. Like I hear that she still has it under control. Like it's like she's juggling like one ball and then someone adds another and she's still got it. The multiple lines that are happening and then like another ball comes in and she's still got it. It's tough. Like she has to, but it's still under control at this point, I think, because then we see that it gets out of control. And I feel
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
it's building and building and building. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's going to become too much. But here it's still, it's hard, but she's focused. She's getting into a groove. A little harder. She's found another kind of groove, but kind of tripping a little bit, maybe. I love that part.
And the new groove is a little bit more intense than the last groove too. Like it's like she's found a new groove at like a next level up. Like as opposed to like going back to her previous. She's like she was struggling a little bit. She put it all together and now she's baselining again at a higher rate. And then the part you just mentioned happens, like the little
Yeah, it's like one of the bars is stretched out and it's sort of like she's doing the same course, but now just added like 10 meters to it. So it takes like a little bit longer to do that lap or something. Yeah. Oh, well, that's where, okay. There, it's drawn out. And then we've cut to Kylo Ren, or rather, we've cut to Darth Vader's mask.
Yeah.
The mangled mask. Granddaddy. Should I keep playing, or do you have immediate thoughts about this?
I don't know. I mean, like, I think keep going. Why? What else is there to say about the Imperial March at this point? Like, it's just kind of like, yep, that's it.
That's it. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, it's Vader's mask, and here's Vader's theme.
Yeah. Now we can hear that we're kind of back to Rey.
It kind of blends. It doesn't just cut; it blends into it, which is like kind of like the bleeding of the Force effect between the two of them.
Yeah, where their realities kind of become. The line is kind of unclear, where one can reach into the other sometimes. After Kylo Ren, so it's the Imperial March as the case is being opened, and then Kylo puts his hand on the mask, and after he puts his hand on there is when we hear Kylo Ren's theme. But it's interesting because what is it? It's a little bit different than it usually sounds. It's just one note. Yeah, okay. It goes like this, but usually his theme goes very subtle difference, just a half step up at the top, at the beginning. So instead of, it's, but it clearly is meant to be his theme there.
Yeah, I think the one note out of step is supposed to kind of play into him being just a little bit off, like his own. Like he's not quite himself yet. Like he hasn't like he's trying so hard. Yeah, well he's trying so hard to be Kylo Ren at the beginning of this movie. Like he's reforged his mask with Kagurumi, whatever. But like he's not. He knows that he's faltering, but he like isn't willing to go. Like he's trying so hard to still be Kylo Ren, and it's like not working, buddy. Sorry. And like it's like
that's a good summation of him for the first half of this movie. Just trying so hard to be Kylo Ren.
Yeah, I think he knows that he's faltering and doesn't want to admit that, and that's why he's trying so hard throughout the movie to like. I talked about this a lot on Star Wars Minutes. I'm trying to repeat myself too much, but he's trying so hard to convince Rey that she's just like him because he's trying to convince himself that he's right. And he's like, I can't be wrong about who I am because that would mean that I've done all these things for nothing or whatever. And so like he's like, I have to have you come to my side to be just like me. And so I think like this is very much this little one note is like a crack in his armor, and his mask is cracked, right? So it's like just that little thing is off. To it reminds me. This is such a wild tangent, but I recently saw Six, the musical about the 6 Wives of Henry VIII, and there's a whole thing, and I watched a deep dive video on YouTube where because. They use green sleeves a lot in the musical as like a bookend for things, whatever.
Like the,
and there's
like
a part,
the song.
Yeah, and they in the beginning there's a part where they're playing it and it's just one note that's out of harmony with the rest of the composition, and then at the end of the musical they put that note back into harmony, and it's like very subtle, but it's a really interesting thing. And I think about that of like. This is his theme, but this one note is different. This is a crack in his armor. This is him like starting to like fall from who he is.
Yeah, I like that. And especially like Kylo putting his hand on Vader's helmet is so like, it reminds me of people, I don't know, I'm not going to get the terminology for this right, but maybe like who want to reconnect with themselves and then maybe they touch crystals or something. Sorry, I'm not really representing this. I don't really know if that's quite a thing, but I know like people will do their rituals, like they'll have their items or whatever that are kind of help them channel something, whether it's like incense or crystals or something. And so here Kylo's kind of doing the same thing, but with Vader's mask. He's like, all right, help me get into my vibe.
Yeah, it's just trying to channel those vibes,
Yeah, exactly. All right, so Rey trips. She ignites the blue lightsaber.
Yeah, and now it's a lot more conflicting chaos as opposed to organized chaos.
Exactly. Yeah.
Things are falling apart. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. She's a lot less under control now.
Yeah.
Yeah. She still manages to slice a tree trunk, and she's still doing okay, but she's mentally like not composed.
Yeah. And like the music raises the stakes as if she's in an epic battle, like a real battle. And I think that's true. I think she's in this battle with herself and her own struggles and her own frustration. And that's why the music is playing it that way.
Yeah. I mean, not to mention the intrusion of Kylo starting to hit her, starting to knock her. And it's like good thing she's on a training course. It's sort of like she has something to take it out on, but we see how she kind of perhaps takes it slightly too far with like BB-8 and everything. And and because she's knocked off her game. In the background, we're hearing duelistic strings, which is that Frank Lehman describes it as churning chromatic string polyphony, used during Yoda Palpatine fight in Revenge of the Sith and recalled during initial confrontation between Rey and Kylo Ren.
Wow,
TROS.
I did not know that detail. That's really interesting to me. Those two songs, that's the same music. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's like very easy to miss because again, this is not a leitmotif; it's an incidental motif, so it's less kind of important. It's more like underscore type of thing, but. Yeah, it is interesting whether it's intentional or not.
I'm going back to my original point about the lightspeed skipping scene. I'm 100% now thinking that was intentional. Of like we're going to keep pulling things from previous movies to put in this one.
No, I think it was intentional from
I'm
someone.
owning that.
Oh no, I think it was intentional from someone. I just don't know if it was intentional from the music editor or intentional from Williams. But I agree that it was intentional. But it's like it's basically that fast.
Well, I'm not saying it to you. I'm saying it to whoever made that YouTube video.
Oh.
Who was like, oh, it's lazy, and it's like, no, it's part of an overall point they're doing.
No, I thought that I think that they agreed that it was intentional, but that they were intentionally doing a shortcut.
Yeah, but I think when it's in the context of the overall film, I'm giving yes, if you only looked at this 1 second and only looked at this one moment and said that, maybe, but when you start seeing it happening other moments within the same 5 minutes, it's like, okay, no, this is clearly like part of an overall plan. So sorry, you're gonna play the music. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I kind of already played it. Like it was. Okay. It's just what's in the background. I was just kind of demonstrating what is on the screen for people who can read music, and I'll see. You can barely hear it. It's like see that little string thing in the background. That's all that is. It's so subtle. Yeah. But I think everyone has like a different tolerance level for it, kind of like how Pete and Alex say with jokes, like for the humor. I think people like 80% of it, but the 20% that they like is not the same, perhaps. So there can be disagreements on these specifics. I feel like this is a similar type of thing where like some people like one might be just going too far for them. Where for another person, they're like, no, that's fine. Yeah. And I think something like the duelistic strings being here and also being in Revenge of the Sith is a slightly different case or a fundamentally different case than the Holst chords being in the other part because the Holst chords are kind of, they could have been like cut from a place and put in by a music editor, whereas duelistic strings, because it's part of the texture of a cue, it's like that had to be it's part of it's embedded in it. But still, like I always wonder how intentional John Williams is about these things because he's done so many movies and he himself doesn't personally keep a list of all the freaking things. He's probably done this in other movies too. The same thing, without knowing it. I always wonder I always wonder which things he brings in are intentional and not, especially for the like less important ones. Like for the themes, I think he knows what he's doing most of the time. But for some of those little ones, I'm just like, I don't know, just 20 years apart, did you just see a similar thing and just have like the same idea? Or like, what's happening?
Well, I mean, 20 years apart, but he also frequently is going out and conducting orchestras, playing, like he literally was just in LA last night doing it. Like he does that. So I don't think it's music he's unfamiliar with. Like, I didn't mean like that, but you know what I mean? Like, I think like, I don't know if every composer for movies is as frequently playing the music from the movies as he is. Like, I think so. I think that a lot of stuff might be more fresh in his mind than it might be for others because he's so frequently doing concerts of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. Though he doesn't do concerts where he's conducting to picture. So when he's doing concerts, he's doing like the hits, the concert suites, and the things that are like he's doing Imperial March, like Yoda's theme, that kind of thing. And sometimes the underscore that's like in the rest of the movie gets forgotten. I don't know. I wish that like prequel music and sequel music got performed more in concert because it's like always the original trilogy. Whenever I go to a John Williams concert. Yeah. Which is fine. It's great, but he's done a lot more music for Star Wars too. Okay, let's continue playing. I love his dirty lightsaber. Oh. Oh, now Rey is having her flashback. They're both having concurrent flashbacks.
Join me. You killed him.
So that is quite a cool piece of sound design. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I was thinking when I was listening to it earlier how this is definitely one of those scenes where sound design alone, I can tell what's happening in the scene without having any visuals for it, which I think happens a lot in these movies, but I think especially this one really feels like, I as someone who's listened to a lot of like audio dramas, like BBC ones where they don't have a narrator and you have to just kind of follow what's happening, and like a lot of times there's moments where there's action scenes happening and there's no one saying like, and then this person hits somebody or whatever. It's just all audio editing, and I think this really feels like it could have been done that way. Like it feels like it's very clear what's like that she's training, and then Kylo like invades it, and then they both kind of have this like vision together, sort of, or like this like mixing of visions and memories. And
Yeah, and it's not like for either of them. Like we see Kylo as being the one imposing this on Rey, which he is, but neither of their visions seem particularly good. Like they're both having kind of freaky visions. Yeah, concurrent flashbacks, I guess. Young Rey is like seeing her parents leaving. She's Kylo, is seeing his father, or maybe Rey is seeing his father. It's kind of a little bit unclear, but it's kind of concurrently happening and kind of cutting between them both. And then the soundscape is kind of enveloping the whole. Like the soundscape kind of is detailed in that it gives like specifics for each tiny little flashback scene, but then it's wrapped in this whole sound treatment of the vision where you can tell that they're in a shared kind of psychic space right now. It's not like the jungle soundscape. It's not like Kylo's room soundscape. It's like this other dimension that they're sharing.
yeah, it's like the sound of their dyad versus the sound of the location they're in.
Yeah. So, yeah, the first Skype chat. That kind of is a big part of it for sure.
Yeah.
And so now she's back to reality. And we can hear it in the soundscape. We hear the jungle coming back in.
BB-8, I'm so sorry. Didn't finish the training course.
Now she's telling Leia.
I'm just not feeling myself. I know it looks like I'm making excuses.
Don't
I really
tell me
liked
what
this line.
things look like. Tell me what they are.
I really liked that line when I saw it in the theater. Yeah.
I think I'm just tired. That's all.
So we're back to
General,
that
The Falcon's
unobtrusive
still
underscore.
Commander's asking for guidance.
I will earn your brother's saber. One day.
So this is back to the Leia Trains Rey.
No, you can't do it for me.
Never underestimate a droid.
Yes, Master.
Thoughts?
I probably have less thoughts about this section than anything else we've talked about today, because that's pretty cut and dry what's happening. We have a nice little, like I said, unobtrusive sound in the background. I think that Leia Trains Rey coming back in, kind of almost like we talked about this cacophony of different style, like Rey, Luke, Leia being all brought in. And I think like this is like where it's kind of calming down again. It's kind of getting back into the routine of like, okay, I did the thing. Now I'm going to get this back to you, even though you're going to get back to me in a scene later. But like, it's like very much this, like, I'm no longer putting all these things together. I'm kind of putting myself back into your hands as my master and that kind of thing. And
Yeah. So Leia's theme, like the Leia Trains Rey bit of music, and just in general, the portrayal of Leia and Rey's relationship, it's a very different relationship than Rey and Luke. And it does make me wonder if Rey misses having a more hardcore teacher sometimes, because well, Luke was definitely a more hardcore teacher in that he didn't even want a teacher at the beginning, and then he seems like he was, much tougher. Leia seems like extremely nurturing to the point where like, well, I think about like how in high school, like I had some really, really nice teachers that were really forgiving and whatever, and I had some that were really kind of hardcore and strict. And these were the rules. You have to get your stuff in on time. It has to be like this, etc. And I loved my really nurturing teachers, but I did better in the strict teachers classes. And so I just wonder about that with Rey.
I wonder if setting aside toxic strict teachers, like we're not talking about.
Yeah, I'm not talking about abusive. I'm just talking about they had clear standards, and it was very easy for me to be like, I know what their expectation is, and I can meet that because it's clear.
Yeah, so we're not talking about like J.K. Simmons in, what was that movie called?
I don't know.
It's like Haywire or something like that. It's
I
where
haven't
he's
seen it.
It's that movie where he's like a jazz like composer. And it's like there's like a drummer that's like, anyway, someone's screaming it at your podcast right now while I'm saying it out loud. Sorry. I think anyway. I think that what happens sometimes when you're someone who is working towards like something that's genuinely difficult, like art, like you're saying, like having this kind of, or like classes or becoming a Jedi. I think that when you have a teacher who's too nurturing and laid back, then that leaves a lot of space for you to get hypercritical of yourself, which then might, like, if you don't feel like you're getting enough guidance, you almost feel like, wait, is what I'm doing not good enough? It's not worth the effort, or not worth the feedback or whatever. Whereas, like, I think when someone else is kind of giving you the really strict, like, instructions, it can make you go like, okay, I know what my task is. I know what I have to do, and I can rise to beat that. And like, I think that might be part of it. Like, I think because Leia, by virtue of not having the ability to create original dialogue for her, I think Leia's instruction style is of mostly asides is leaving a lot of gap space for Rey to feel like she's not good enough, because she's like taking that time for herself to think like, I'm not worthy of this lightsaber. I did not complete the course. Like, it's a lot of like self-criticism, and I think she's afraid because she's seen what happened with Kylo and stuff like that. But that's how it plays to me. It's like, oh, because Leia is not a strict teacher, which is funny because out of the two, if you were talking about original trilogy Star Wars and you were talking about Leia Organa or Luke Skywalker, who was going to be like the hard ass and who's going to be the soft boy?
Totally.
I think it's like, you would 100% think of like Leia as the revolutionary who shoots through walls and kicks open trash compactors and stuff like that. Whereas Luke is like, I wanted to go play with my friends. And that's And so it is kind of funny that Luke ends up being the one who's kind of like the grizzled, like hammering instructions into somebody thing, whereas Leia is the one that's like, just tell me how you feel. Like, tell me what's real. What's up? Like,
interestingly, I also think about like people how they develop as they age, or like as we age, like the ways that like the edges of our personality we kind of try to temper and go the other way a little bit. So like if Leia was like, say, like just a hard ass like whippersnapper, like would have been more taskmasting, like maybe part of her personal growth has been like becoming more nurturing because she's set in her leadership role, so she can, maybe that's been like how she has rounded out her own personality. Maybe Luke, well, his is more reactionary, I would say, but he has probably been more kind of easygoing, but through Jedi training kind of realized, I need to adopt a little bit more discipline and whatever later. So
and honestly, maybe even specifically his failure with Kylo, like his failure of like, oh, I went too easy on Ben, maybe because he was my nephew, maybe because I was so caught up in my idea of like my way of using the Force saved the galaxy, and so this is the right way for everybody kind of vibe. And like his own hubris, maybe he was too light touch, and then now he's seeing it like, oh, that light touch left a lot of space for my Padawan to have enough self-doubt to follow the dark side. So like now with this new Padawan, I have to be very much like, no, if you falter at all, things are going to go catastrophically terrible. So you have to listen to me. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll keep playing.
Okay, good.
So now it's later in the day. We see Rey studying the ancient texts in her tent.
Vulcan's back!
And her friends are back.
I need a fire crew here! I need another one at the back! Go! Go! It's on fire! The whole thing's on fire! Oh.
So we yeah, quite an entrance. But this little bit where Rey is studying the texts, how did you feel about seeing this?
I liked it as a carrying forth of the end of the last movie, because like it was very clear that she'd saved the texts, and I think that it plays a pretty vital role in showing her training, because as we mentioned, like we Leia being a lowercase j Jedi, in our new assessment of that, like as much as Leia is a good like person to facilitate her training, I don't know if Leia has enough of the like book knowledge, basically, or like she doesn't have the knowledge of Jedi training that like Luke would have, or not even Luke really, but like the way that like a Jedi would have been trained during the Republic era, right? Like that, or like that kind of thing. So I think that Rey needs to have the combination of the practical training she's getting from Leia and like the like text training, so she can like figure out what she has to work on her own. So she's like doing an independent study of Jedi.
Totally.
And I think that it's necessary. I think that like having these ancient texts explain why Rey is able to figure things out, like force healing and stuff like that. Because the only thing I don't like about it is that she's opening the page that's like literally a picture of the Wayfinder.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this ancient text has this thing that's only specific to this particular thing happening, and like that's like, I would rather it be a page that shows an injury being healed by the Force, almost like an airplane emergency thing, than being the Wayfinder. So that's the one thing that I like. I like that she's using the text to study the Jedi's code or training with, and I just wish it wasn't so like a needle drop of plot point for this story.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also love that she is studying the ancient texts. Like I love that they exist. I like the way that they were introduced in The Last Jedi, with Luke trying. Like I was excited about Luke wanting to burn them, and then Yoda showing up, and then I was excited about Rey resurrecting them, the study of them. Like I liked both of them. So which is why I'm not on the same page as people who are like, The Last Jedi was trying to say burn the past, burn the texts, and now The Rise of Skywalker is saying forget about that, we're bringing them back. To me, that's like definitely not what either movie is saying. It's like I just don't even know where to begin with that, because to me there's no dissonance with the fact that Luke wants to burn the text. Makes complete sense given for him in that moment and in that era of his life, and Rey wanting to study the text makes complete sense for her and makes complete sense.
She has the texts in the movie. It's not like she didn't have them in Last Jedi and then they gave them to her in Rise of Skywalker. She has them on the Falcon. You see them in a drawer. Like she did that, and that's why Yoda is like. I mean, like. I do think like the moment where Yoda's like, oh, they're kind of boring. They're not page turners. Go ahead and burn the tree down. Like that moment, like the line. It's
kind of like Ahsoka saying,
like
"I'm no Jedi." It's like so contextual to like Yoda's being funny there, and like trying to say like, of course they're not everything. Like they're not everything. It doesn't mean you can't find something in them.
Yeah, and the thing you just mentioned about burning the past down is one of my biggest pet peeves with the way people talk about both Last Jedi and this movie is like, a lot of times people talk about this movie with criticism saying like, how do you go from let the past die and then go to this movie? I'm like, but let the past die is not the point of Last Jedi. It's
totally
it's the villain's point of view. And it's what leads him to go to first of all, try to slaughter all the rebels who are trying to escape from the radish and go down to Crate. And it's also like It's what leads him to try to blow his own mother up with Death Star tech, with like that, like trying to blow open the walls of the crate base. And it's like, he is wrong. Kylo is wrong when he says let the past die. And like the whole movie builds up to this hero moment for Luke of realizing he can't run away from the past and has to go back and do exactly what he said. Luke Skywalker's going to walk out with a laser sword and face down the entire First Order. Like, that's what he does because he realizes, like, oh, somebody has to stand up to give people hope, and that's what we're here for. So, like, it's wild to me that people... I don't want to ship shame, but I do think a lot of it comes out of people being Reylo shippers, and so they think, well, because this is Kylo Rey thing, what Kylo is saying is the point of view of the movie, because, like, Ben Solo is not necessarily purely a villain. And it's like, but when Kylo is saying that, he is saying it as a villain who is broken and misplaced and mistaken. Like he's almost there. And that's why Rey turns away from him when she does, because Rey is like, oh, I thought I was on the same page with this guy, but we are going in the exact opposite direction. And it's like, the point of view of the hero of the movie is the point of the movie. The movie is trying to, like, she says, no, I have to go protect the people I care about. And then we get the next thing from Rose Tico, which is like, save the people that you love. That's how we're going to win. And it's like, that's more the point of the movie than let the past die, kill it if you have to. Like, that is not the point of that movie. And it's just such... It frustrates me because, like, people who love that movie so much seem to have gotten the exact wrong point of what the movie is trying to say. And and then they take that and then they hate The Rise of Skywalker because of it. And it's like that's not... but both movies work together in a fluid motion in a way that, like...
I totally agree.
Yeah, I know. I could talk about it for hours.
I love both movies. Like, I love The Last Jedi, and... if I like had to pick, I would say that I probably love Last Jedi a little bit more than The Rise of Skywalker. But for me, they're both like, I really like them both, and I think The Rise of Skywalker works because of The Last Jedi.
Agree.
And like The Last Jedi for me sets up so much for The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Like I mean,
sorry, I cut you off.
No. Going back to what you said about let the past die and the like, you know, burning the text or whatever, and the villain's point of view. Not only Kylo Ren, like, not only was he a villain at the time of him saying "let the past burn" or whatever, if we just consider him neither villain nor hero, he is a character who is still stumbling on his journey. So it's like, would I listen to myself when I'm like, was like, you know, in my biggest depression? Like, would I listen to the things that I'm like saying at that point, like as me now? Like, we're catching him at a bad time, sort of like how Luke in The Last Jedi, you know, for most of the movie, for the first, you know, half of the movie, he's also in his, like, don't listen to him at this point, period. Yes. Where he's in his era where he's like, he's in his similar state as Kylo, where he's not really feeling himself. He's not really, we're not going to listen to that Luke. Luke comes around at the end of that movie. And
we're listening to him at a point in his arc where he hasn't figured it out yet. Like, and that's the same with Kylo and with Luke. Exactly.
Which is why to me, it's so beautiful when he catches Rey's, when he, like, the lightsaber later. He's like, this is a, you know, how you don't disrespect this lightsaber.
Yeah.
Like, this is completely in line with Luke's journey starting from The Last Jedi. It's not...
I think I talk about that on Star Wars Minute when I'm on it later. Yeah.
Nice.
I think you'll appreciate that. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I won't go into it right now because I've done it a lot, but I also think that Rey Palpatine is a heightening of Rey Nobody. I don't think it's a contradiction of Rey Nobody, personally. I think that the
me
message,
too. I talked about that on my minutes of Star Wars Minute.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, I mean, like, and then for just the real quick version of it is that I think that if the argument is that anybody, it doesn't matter where you come from, it matters what you do with things, like, that is only heightened by coming from the worst possible source as opposed to not mattering at all. Like, that's my opinion on it.
I agree completely.
Exactly. So, I will say, to your point about giving the edge to The Last Jedi, I think that I also agree, and I think for me that comes mostly down to filmmaking, just because, like, JJ is a good filmmaker, but Rian Johnson is a great filmmaker. So I think that's kind of like, I think that Last Jedi, I think that I would consider it the best made Star Wars movie, at least in the, I think that, I don't think that Solo or Rogue One is a better made movie. So I think that like, I probably consider, I know that like Empire is pretty great as well, but I mean, you gotta love Irv Kershner, but I think that for me, I think that Last Jedi is just such a well-constructed film, but Rise of Skywalker, I think, has more merit than it gets credit for.
Yeah, no, I agree. So where were we? I think I was asking how you felt about
Ancient texts, yes.
Ancient texts, that's right. Great. Yeah. Love them.
All of it's on fire. Hey,
There's a spy?
really could have used your help out there.
How'd it go?
Really bad, actually. Really bad.
On ship.
What'd you do to the droid?
What'd you do to the Falcon?
Falcon's a lot better shape than he is.
BB-8's not on fire. The
What's
whole
left
lot
of him isn't on
Rapid fire.
You tell me first.
You know what you are?
What?
You're difficult. Really difficult.
I remember I really liked that part when I saw
I did too.
You're difficult. Like the way that she kind of breaks character slightly there. Or she doesn't break character, but we just see a side of Rey that's like this side. Poe brings out a side of Rey that we don't normally see.
Yeah.
Which is, what's
Poe and Rey perform, which is we've never really seen Poe and Rey interact until this movie, which is kind of wild. But the way that they interact is sibling-like to me, or it's sibling-like, or it is divorced parents who are good co-parents. Like, so they might bicker, but they're not bickering.
they can still
out
work
of, like,
together, but
yeah, they're bickering, but they bicker like with familiarity, and there is like a level of like they're frustrated with each other, but they're not like there's not hatred or bile in that frustration.
Yeah.
But I think this scene does a lot of the dialogue snapping back and forth. I think it does a lot of establishing the Poe and Rey relationship very quickly, because we haven't had one in 3 movies. So it is like very quickly like these two, this is like there's a lot happening in this moment and a lot of things are being said and it's all happening very quickly together.
yeah, and it kind of shortcuts.
Yeah.
In a way that I find satisfying, because I don't need to see like a movie where they're getting to know each other. I think it's easier to show in this way. Oh, they must already be like intimate with each other as friends, or like not intimate, but you know what I mean? They must already be close enough to bicker like this. Because if you're still kind of acquaintances, you're not going to bicker like that. So it does good work to, quickly move us, give us a sense of their friendship and how much time has passed, how much time they've spent together, et cetera. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, because unfortunately, I will say it's one of the flaws with the structure of Last Jedi coming off of The Force Awakens is that we don't get 2 of the lead like protagonist characters really in scenes together all across 2 full movies, which is like I get it. And this movie, I think, does the same thing of like sacrificing certain characters' arcs in ways that I wish they hadn't, to focus on other things. But yeah, so I think this is like a moment of like I agree as dialogue is very much music to me. Like for what music is for you, dialogue is for me. And this is such a shortcut. It's a great way to describe it. Like it is a very quick way of saying these two are already very familiar with each other. They already have a dialogue. They already have a dialogue. They already have a way of working together. You can tell both of them were quickly thrust into a high pressure situation where Poe is very much taking on this kind of mantle of leadership of the rebels, and Rey is kind of also taking on this like form of being this like rallying figure and being this like Jedi savior type, but she's not necessarily like a military presence for them, and that's like an interesting thing. And like she very much has the pressure of, I have to master being a Jedi so I can fight the Sith guy, not the Sith, but the dark side user on the other side. Like, it's the 2 of them have very high pressure roles within the resistance now.
Totally.
And they're both kind of blowing off steam with each other in it, which I think is really fascinating. And
that's a good point.
Leads to tension. Yeah.
That's a good point. And I think Rey and Poe, like, the way, well, I guess we see it a little bit more in the like next set of minutes, but just that tension between like their different roles, like the utility of Rey, not being out on the field with everyone because she's doing her special thing by Jedi training. And then Poe, this is getting into next set of minutes, kind of being like, you're the best fighter we have, which is, a little bit questionable, but also a little guilt trippy. And I feel like Rey I feel like Rey probably also feels a little bit like, is there an element of truth to what Poe is saying? Am I being a little bit selfish by spending time, floating rocks and going across like ropes and stuff? It's probably a thing that crosses her mind, but I guess that's why Leia's there, to be like, no, you're on the right path. Like, you're all good. Yeah. Continuing.
Difficult, man.
You are.
Rey,
Finn. Oh, you made it back.
Yeah, barely.
buddy,
So,
look at you.
bad mood.
You're a
Me?
mess.
Him.
Always.
Do we have a spy?
And I like seeing Rey and Finn interact in a little bit more
You like
progressed way.
Yeah, well, it got us back here.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
the
too.
compressor's down.
Oh, I know. I was there.
Because now they're also familiar enough to not be just like nice and just like about the direct job. It feels like Poe or Finn is the one that she can confide in for like the real facts. Like,
Yeah.
and Finn will be there for her in that capacity.
And he's kind of in between his friend and his other friend, it's when you have two friends that you hang out with more individually each time and not as a group together, and they don't always mesh well as a group, and you're like, guys, can we just order nachos? Can we just stop? Like,
Yeah. The Last Jedi, like, one thing about The Rise of Skywalker that helped me was, I guess it helped me with my feelings about Poe, because in The Last Jedi, I didn't warm up to Poe as a character until The Rise of Skywalker. In The Force Awakens, I didn't really care. In The Last Jedi, I didn't really care. Like, I, was like Team Holdo all the way. And Poe kind of annoyed me a little bit. Like, I do see that he kind of grew a little bit at the end, but in general, kind of the bravado of Poe, similar to the bravado of Han Solo, just didn't do it for me. And I felt the way about Han Solo as a kid too. Like, I was just like, okay, like, I didn't dislike him. I just didn't really care, like him that much.
yeah.
And in this movie, I like Poe. Like, it makes me warm up to Poe. And I think what you're saying about like having him interact more with the protagonists is part of it. Like, we see him as more part of the whole thing rather than kind of on his own thing on the ship with leadership, with Holdo and that whole thing. Like, it's helpful to see him with peers. Like, I think just seeing them in the peer group is helpful.
Yeah, because like Empire Strikes Back splits up its protagonists as well, but it splits them up as a group. Like Luke is off by himself talking to Yoda, which is great, and you have R2, but like Han, Leia, and C-3PO and Chewie are all together, and so like they're all having scenes playing off each other. Whereas with Last Jedi, each of the three main leads are all doing their own thing throughout the entire movie and not working together on anything. And like, so
True.
like which is part of why I do wish that Rose had a bigger role in this movie.
Because Finn
Rose
spent
is
his time with Rose in that movie.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Rose would have been like a better glue for that group. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have liked to see Rose in that group. And I talked about this on Star Wars Minute for my minutes, which were 16 through 20. So it'd been next week on the show was the one that I talked about there. And I did kind of like posit the question of, like, does Star Wars know what to do with like two women in a friend group?
Yeah.
It's kind of like always one.
Yeah. I had the minutes where I had essentially right before Leia's death scene. So I had the fight between Kylo and Rey. My minutes began with her facing off her dark side self and ended with them still in the fight. Mm-hmm. But I had the quick moment of like, Maz going, Leia knows what to do. And I feel like in that scene, there are too many characters that all kind of serve the same role in the film, which is Connix and Rose, and I always forget Dominic Moynihan's character, but those three people all have the same basic job in the movie, which is to like look at screens and repeat like things that are resistance strategy things and talk about Leia. And so it's like, oh, it's hard when you have three characters that all have very short scenes together and like they all feel like they're getting shafted a little bit with screen time because none of them are doing like the one job. It should be one character, so it should be just I feel like Connix should be at the base dealing with Leia, and Rose should be out with the other trio and be part of a a quad set basically.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to do that. So that's like one thing that
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Lightspeed, skip the Falcon!
Actually,
All
turns
right,
out
guys,
you can.
we just landed, okay?
What happened?
Bad news, that's what happened.
No spy.
No, spy.
Did we make contact with a spy or not?
There's a mole in the first order and they sent us a message.
You dropped a tree on him?
You blew both subtle to
You know what, maybe you should
guys.
have
I'm going to say the first time I saw this movie, probably the second time too, I think most of that conversation went over my head because it was probably so fast. And I didn't notice that BB-8 got a tree dropped on him until like Rey was apologizing. Like it's sort of like a few things were happening where I didn't notice them happen. Like I had to be told the showing didn't quite land with me, perhaps.
Yeah. I think it works though because the tree, it's not like a whole like sequoia, it's like a little shrubbery kind of tree, right? So it's like, like he's fine. But like, so I think Rey is like, it wasn't as bad as it sounds. Like it's kind of like that kind of vibe of like.
Well, I guess the bigger point is that even though a lot of these details kind of passed over my head, I feel like I still got the gist of it. And for me, that is usually fine. I'm used to missing a lot of details, especially if it's like a fight or something. Like I'm always going to miss like the individual beats of like an action sequence or something, because that's just not how my brain works. I can tell when there's like hints. The music kind of tells me, oh, this side did something good. Oh, this side did. I kind of wait for the music and the dialogue to help keep the score for me, because I'm just not really noticing all the details of like, oh, that happened. So I understand the implications of like the fire going in there rather than there. I don't always get that. But, and similar with kind of this particular conversation or things where I didn't notice the details to begin with. It's still, the package still worked for me despite missing some of the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah. What I was saying was less like about your point and more about, I think the way it happens where you see it and then it gets repeated again also plays into Rey's own. Like Rey had not processed that she dropped a tree on BB-8 until Poe says it back to her. And then she's like, hang on, like let's not get too much on my case. So I think it actually works great. Even in characters, you have things that actually happen get repeated back to her a little bit, which is fun. So,
yeah, that's true. That's true. And also, Rey feels probably disproportionately like. Imagine if Han Solo like dropped a tree on 3PO. Like he wouldn't be like, "I'm so sorry, 3PO." Like, it would just be like, whatever. But
even like, stop walking around. He would make fun of 3PO for it happening.
Your fault for following me. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And I also, going back to my whole co-parenting thing with Poe and Rey, both of them are talking to each other like, you let him stay up and watch what? Like it feels very much like oh, you were watching my kid and I was watching your kid and we both messed up our own kids. Like it's very fun. Like, yeah,
that's true. Yeah, it does have that energy for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the end of the minutes. Are there any, is there anything that you didn't get to say or that you like thoughts about the rest of the film?
I think I am very on record with my loud and passionate thoughts about this film. So I love it. Would I have liked for it to have had another year to be filmed and let the story breathe a little bit more? Yes. Do I think this movie could have been split into two movies with almost all the same plot points and worked better? Yes, I 100% do. But I am very much a fan of Rey becoming a Skywalker. I don't mind Rey being a Palpatine, even though there's a lot of steps that it takes to get there. But for me, as somebody who changed her name and somebody who really embraces the concept of found family, the Rey Skywalker thing really resonates a lot with me. And so I get a little bit defensive when people start pushing back against it because it matters a lot to me. And I understand that that's how people feel about the Rey Nobody thing in Last Jedi. I just happen to think that those two aren't as directly in conflict as some people think they are. But yeah, same thing like you said with Luke catching the lightsaber. It's a big moment for me that I think is exactly pulling from the other movie, and it's respecting it, not disrespecting it. And I sobbed in the theater when Han Solo showed up because my own father had passed away about a month earlier. And so having this moment where it was like, oh, and also like Star Wars had been a huge comfort for me when my father passed away, because right after he died was when The Mandalorian launched. And so it was like one of the first moments that I felt like I wasn't actively thinking about things like memorial services and funerals and stuff like that was when I watched The First Mandalorian and met Grogu for the first time. And it was like, wow, I actually had this one little moment that made me like feel wonder and joy again while the worst thing in my life was happening. So it was like, you know, Star Wars had been this gift. And then they come to the end of that period of time and then have a scene where a character is speaking to their dead father that they killed. Like there's like a whole, it was a lot. And it was like, yeah, that was a gift for me that I will appreciate for this film. And so I think that too makes me stay defensive. So I often call myself a Rise of Skywalker apologist, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad I got to talk to you.
Me too. I'm so glad you gave me minutes. I'm so glad I got such a Rey heavy section, which I know you wouldn't have not given me a Rey. It's also very hard for this movie not to have a Rey heavy section.
True.
But yeah, I think that I really hope that I resent the way the internet has just accepted that this movie is bad and treats it like it's like the unwanted like child in the family of Star Wars movies. And I really hope that, not unlike the way that even the prequels have kind of been given like a redemption arc a little bit, I kind of hope that like maybe when the new Jedi Order movie comes out and maybe like when more ancillary media forms around the sequel era and maybe just with like some time and some distance, I hope that people can look back on this movie with a little bit more. I hope it kind of turns into a Return of the Jedi situation where Return of the Jedi, I think growing up for me, was always treated as like the worst of the three movies, even though it was my favorite as a kid. And now it's looked back on with like, oh no, it was great. It's part of the original trilogy.
Part of the OT,
yeah. So I hope that maybe like in 10 years or whatever, this movie gets a little bit more justice. I think it's unfairly maligned, in my opinion.
I completely agree with you. And what you said about the internet response, I feel, has done the movie a disservice, because I think critiquing the movie critiquing any media is necessary for the survival of. I mean, like, I think I'm very pro like critique and talking about things and not just being like defending everything just because you can, which sometimes is also how the internet reacts. When some people, you know, don't like something, other people sometimes like artificially defend it too much, where it's like, wait, we don't need to go, we don't need to just like push back against the pushback, and then like, we don't need to do that. And I think a lot of the meta information about this movie it's been a looming shadow over a lot of the commentary, where it's like, I think a lot of people, again, I'm not talking about people who are giving like, who just saw it in a different way. Like, you can't change, you can't control the way that it just, you know, seeps into your mind the first time you watch it. Like, it's fine to critique it. It's fine to not like it. But just like the steadfast holding on to like, well, but this is what happened in the process of making it. So like, I've already decided that it's not good because of the process of how it went.
Yeah. A lot of people, too, I think, are too forgiving of, not too forgiving, but are too kind to the Colin Trevorrow treatment for Duel of the Fates. So I think it's a lot easier to have a treatment and some concept art and be like, oh, wow, that would have been a way better version of this movie. But I feel like Trevorrow's track record is I didn't know that people were
kind to that version, are they?
I think people are more like, oh, it's not Rise of Skywalker, so this would have been great. And I think that I think that in I think if there was an alternate universe where somehow Duel of the Fates got made, and then somebody got exactly that same kind of treatment and concept art leaked for Rise of Skywalker, they would have the exact opposite conversation of like, oh, can you believe there was a movie where like Rey was a Palpatine and she fights
so cool.
Kylo on the Death Star, and then all the Jedi come and like rise up within her to fight Palpatine? Like, that would have been how people talked about it. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think with The Rise of Skywalker, I agree with a lot of the critiques on specific things. Like, it's a movie that I think the movie works for me on an emotional level. It did hit me in that way that it did make me it led to a transcendence, which is how most Star Wars movies do, with the exception of Solo and Rogue One. Rogue One did a little bit toward the end, but like 1 through 9, all of the episode films do make me transcend a little bit. Like, it makes me feel like I feel heightened. I feel like I'm wrapped up in something kind of bigger than me. And so that doesn't mean all the details are perfect. And The Rise of Skywalker, I feel, has it works for me, like the big strokes, all the themes, like it works for me. And a lot of the details I think could have been done better.
Yeah, I agree.
But the film ultimately works for me, and that's usually my ultimate judge of a film, where I can understand, I can agree with anyone nitpicking 100 details, but it still doesn't change the fact that like I have an overall, I walk away overall feeling positively about it. And I think some people are maybe work differently. Maybe some people are more sensitive to the details, and if the details aren't there, then the movie's not there. But that's just not how I am.
Yeah, and I do think that. I think this movie. I think every Star Wars movie is a little bit flawed in how it's made. Like they're not like Kurosawa films. You know, they are approximations of Kurosawa films. Yes, but like they are. I don't think that very many Star Wars films transcend into the space of like not avant-garde, but like of like true auteur filmmaking. They are studio films. Even the original, which was a pretty massive indie sort of vibe, but like a lot of collaboration, a lot of things, and they are stitched together. They're blockbustery. They're what they are, and that works. And I think that Rise of Skywalker, for some reason, a lot of those stitchings get more criticism than I think other movies in the same franchise do. And I think that the first half of this movie is a mess. There's a lot of issues with it. And like, yes, and the whole thing with like, oh yeah, by the way, there was a whole secret fleet of Exegol that we never knew about. Like that's a thing that I'm like, again, I think if you had made this episode 9 and 10 and like seeded in some of that stuff in episode 9 and then brought it to the forefront in episode 10. Like there's, in my mind, there's a version of this movie that ends with Kylo coming back to the light at the end of this battle with Rey, and then you find out that General Pryde's been working with Palpatine this whole time. Palpatine's like, you know, you find out Palpatine's back, and then he's the villain of the next movie, like that, and then that movie's the capper for the entire saga. Like same plot points, but given space to breathe and given space for the audience to learn a thing and process a thing, as opposed to like rushing into the next thing so fast. But your moment of transcendence thought, I feel that way about it because I think once you get to the other Endor moon where the broken Death Star is, from then on, this movie cooks, in my opinion. Like it is so good from then on. Like all the stuff with Rey losing her shit and going after Kylo and murdering Kylo basically, and then catching herself, pulling herself back, healing him, dealing with Han Solo, going back, finding Luke, talking to Luke, like going off to face Palpatine, Ben Solo showing up there, all the rebels, and then the moment, everything coming together, the whole galaxy like rising up to fight the First Order, like it's so good. It's so good. It's just like I love it from that, and I am all the Jedi, like, and that, like I am so like. I saw this in the theater, and I had been told all day that I was going to hate it because everybody was mad at it that day, and I was crying, and I was so invested, and I loved it, and I saw it with my best friend from high school that I bonded with over Star Wars movies. I'd watched the originals with him. I'd seen the prequels in theaters with him, and like it was like, and like I said, I had the personal connection to the Han Solo thing. So this movie was a gift for me, and I love it, and I'm so glad to hear about New Jedi Order because I was really starting to worry that what was going to happen was that Disney Lucasfilm was going to kind of remade that, and we're not going to ever go back to talking about Rey and those people because we're just going to either move to a whole new era or we're going to get so obsessed with this Mandalorian between the two eras thing. And I was just kind of like, I really hope that the sequels don't just kind of get forgotten and don't kind of get just like paved over and like put aside. So knowing that it's still going to matter to like the future of Star Wars means a lot to me. And I guess it's because Rey means so much to me. And like, I really do hope that John Boyega, I know there's talk about they're trying to get him to come back for it. And I hope he does. I
think this movie planted future seeds for him in a big time.
Yeah. I would love Kelly Marie Tran to get like kind of a justice moment with it as well. So hopefully we get some of that kind of stuff in it. But I love these characters and I'm excited to see what happens next with these characters if I can.
Me too.
Awesome.
Well, I'm going to go through the themes really quick and then ask you the questionnaire.
Yeah.
So the themes from this set of minutes were Martial Chords, the Force, Rey's A theme, Leia Trains Rey, Rey's B theme, the chimes, Imperial March, Kylo Ren's aggressive theme, and Duelistic Strings. And then on the soundtrack, it's not on the main, none of this music's on the main soundtrack, but if you have the For Your Consideration soundtrack, the very end of Falcon Flight is the beginning of these minutes. Yeah, so Riley, are you ready for your third go at the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire?
Yes. Let's see if I answer the exact same way again, like I did last time.
That would be funny. Okay, I won't tell you your answers then.
I didn't listen. I didn't look it up because I didn't want to fall for it.
Fun. Okay.
Yeah.
Question number 1. In exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
Wondrous space magic.
You said epic space magic.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I probably knew the word epic was in there, and I
Was
probably my brain.
something different.
But
That's funny.
that's funny.
What is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you want to learn more about?
I'm actually thinking about it. I know this is like a general movie making thing, but I think that I hadn't really thought of until you mentioned it earlier is that like how many different people are involved in like when you said like, oh, this might not have been John Williams, this might have just been like an editor put that in. And that's kind of fascinating to me of like who kind of has the final say over like this is the song that's being used. Like I guess the director to some degree, but like it's fascinating to me that like you have a person whose job it is to put score to the movie, but then you also have somebody else that's like, well, this is how I'm going to use that score in the movie, and that's interesting to me. So I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about that process of like who's deciding what when it comes to editing music into the movie, specifically music as opposed to sound effects and things like that.
Yeah. It's a lot. A lot of it is stuff that we would never guess because there's like the name of John Williams. We assume like the music is all John Williams, but then so much of it is up to the music editor, or is the seed is planted by the music editor. There's so much, and I wish I knew. I vaguely know the process of how it is, but like still on any given production, unless they're sharing all the secrets in a documentary or something, I don't know who made each specific choice, and I would like to know that.
I wonder if even they know, because I know like
because they might not even remember.
Yeah, well, a lot of times in writers' rooms, like people don't remember who pitched what joke because it all becomes like a mash of what's together. And I wonder if like, oh, this like, and I have even times with like when I do a role playing game podcast, and I often co-write the scenarios with one of our co-producers, and a lot of times like he and I forget who pitched what idea because we hand it out together so much. So I'm wondering how much of it is like, oh no, I heard this motif and I knew that it fit in this scene versus like, oh, this was composed exactly for this video, this footage, and yeah.
Yeah. Finally, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
Okay, I have an answer this time that is not a TV show that was scored by Murray Gold. So I hope you're happy to know that information. Although Murray Gold is coming back to do, he's probably already done it, but he came back for Doctor Who's most upcoming specials at least, and probably the further seasons. But he had not been working on the show during Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker's era. They had brought in Segun Okoye, I think his name is something like that, to do it. And now Murray's coming back for Russell T Davies' new era. So I get to hear Murray Gold music on my Doctor Who again pretty soon. I have a different answer for you this time. Is that
cool.
I'm pretty deep into the Across the Spider-Verse score that was done by Daniel Pemberton. It is such a fascinating. There's a lot happening with it. And I think the Into Spider-Verse score is amazing as well. And both movies definitely have a lot of like needle drop kind of moments as well. But the way that Across the Spider-Verse is jumping realities. And so each reality kind of has its own sound and its own music and its own motifs for it. And then you've also got like Miles's themes happening, but then you also have like tracks that feel like almost like an invading force is coming in, and there's sections that are score that are music but almost sounds more like sound effects and these like ethereal, like loud, like again invasive things, and it very much is like anomalies in the music to represent Miles as like an anomaly in the spiders. it's kind of become, unfortunately, a bit of a joke because like people on TikTok have taken like one stinger and are putting it like in a repeated video. But there's a couple. For a while, I'm shocked at how much footage of this movie was filmed and put on TikTok for like a pretty long period of time when the movie came out. I was like, I've never seen that. Almost the entirety of the film was on TikTok for like a week in various chunks because people were talking about scenes and showing scenes and filming stuff. But there's just like so much intensity, and there's like this section at the end where it's very Empire Strikes Back-y, where it's like leading up to a cutoff for the cliffhanger, and it's so dark and heavy, and there's like so much layering happening. It's fascinating. It's a really, really interesting score.
So is there going to be a third movie?
There is. So there was Into the Spider-Verse, there's Across the Spider-Verse, and then coming out, I think, a couple years. I think there's a delay on it, but it's Beyond the Spider-Verse. So.
Okay. As someone who's not familiar with too many superhero movies like Marvel or DC, I have seen Into the Spider-Verse, and I really liked it. And so I do plan to see Across the Spider-Verse. And so I look forward to that.
I would say Across the Spider-Verse is one of the few times where I, as someone who am not as music literate and am not as like, I'm usually someone who is hypnotized by the music in a film, as opposed to this is a movie where I was like actively aware of music because it's so important to, and because similarly with animation in the movie, they really do a lot of like, they change frame rates, they change aspect ratios depending on what's important to the scene in ways that like animation really hasn't done before. Like they did a whole thing in the first movie where like Miles has a different frame rate than any other character in the movie, and then in this movie they have a character who has a different frame rate from even that, and his own frame rate, like different parts of his body have different frame rates because he's supposed to be like almost like a magazine cutout, like because he's a punk character, spider punk, and they like he doesn't quite fit the like the visual, and it's supposed to be almost like someone like took a magazine, like when you see people take like cut out rock magazines and paste them on a wall. His art is supposed to make that kind of vibe, or someone scribbling in a notebook, and so parts of his body move at different frame rates. And similarly, the music does that a lot in the movie as well. Like the music really changes based on what world it's in, what character from that world's there. It's really, really interesting how much it all plays together. So
that's really cool. I didn't know that the first time I went in, but like I watched it because the place where I went to school, CalArts, has like a very, I don't know, it tends to have experimental like animators, and it was like CalArts people who made this film. So when I saw it, I liked it. I was like, I wonder if I just trained to like a CalArts sensibility, where there's lots of creative weird stuff that happens all the time, like not Danny Elfman, like Tim Burton went there, Henry Selick, and stuff like that. Cool. Well, not last time, but the time before, you did mention Doctor Who, and not only because of Murray Gold, but like Delia Derbyshire and all these other people. And I will say, like, since then, I have personally gone on a deep dive. Like, I've listened to so much Delia Derbyshire, and I really liked that recommendation and have gotten really into it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the first time I did Doctor Who, and then the last time I did Gentleman Jack, which I found out while on the show talking to you,
that it was Murray Gold.
Murray Gold. That's why I was like going this time around. I'm like, I have to actually do what they ask, which is pick a movie score and not a TV show.
It doesn't have to be a movie.
But I was like, I was like movie score, and then I was like, and I cannot do another Murray Gold thing. I have to find somebody else. And I almost, because we talked about this in the Discord for Star Wars Minute, which is that when I saw Dial of Destiny, I made the choice to like stay in the theater just because it like meant something to me to like sit and listen to a John Williams score in the theater for the first time and let it play out, because I don't know if I'll ever get that chance again. So it was like I mean, I will get to hear his scores again the rest of my life, but I don't know how many more movies he's going to be scoring, if any, after this one. And so it was kind of like, I know there's not a post-credit scene to this movie, but I just want to sit here and listen to John Williams' music and let it play. And that was kind of like, there was a family that I wish maybe had been a little bit quieter while I was trying to do that, but it was still, there was something about that of like, this is a man who has scored so much of the significant music and things in my life, and like he's obviously getting pretty close to the end of his career and lifespan. Not to be too dark about it, but it was just kind of like, no, out of respect for John Williams, I am going to just sit and listen to this music. So
Yeah.
but I didn't want to John Williams at like what's a non-Star Wars thing? Oh, a different John Williams project.
Many people have done that. I have myself have answered E.T.
Of course. Yeah. But I don't know if I thought that the Dial of Destiny score was particularly like interesting for Williams. I think it was kind of an Indiana Jones score.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's why the Across the Spider-Verse really kind of screamed out at me, because it's a pretty screaming score. So
nice. It's good. It's topical as well. It's still time for me to see it in the theater. So
yeah.
So that's good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Riley. I always like talking to you. Can you tell people where to find your books and your stuff?
Yeah, you can find my books at bookstores. I have three Star Wars books. I have Exploring Tatooine, an illustrated guide. I have Galaxy's Edge, Treasures from Batuu, which is like a little book of like knickknacks and like little tchotchkes from Galaxy's Edge. And then I have the Star Wars Life Day pop-up book, which is very fun.
Oh,
and
that's
so
cool.
it's like advent calendar it's more like pop-up advent calendar than a pop-up book. So it's a little woosher tree that pops up, and there's little paper like ornaments you can hang from the woosher tree. And I like it because it's reusable, so you can put things back in the windows and then like back in the little boxes and fold it up, put it in a shelf, pull it out next year and hang it up again as decoration.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yeah. And then I also have a book that just came out that is now available for public purchase, which is so Karen Hallian, who's like a pretty popular artist of like, she does like a lot of Star Wars fan art and stuff like that. She made a book called the She Series book, and it was based on a art series that she did where it's female characters in profile, and then like a single word that like describes them. And then at first she did them as fictional characters, then she started doing them for real historical women. And then what she did was she took a lot of her historical women ones and made a book where each woman has an essay about her by a different writer, and that was available only through a Kickstarter for a while, but now you can actually buy it from her Etsy store. So that one, I think you have to go to the Etsy store to get it. I don't think you can get it at any bookstore.
Yeah. Who did you write?
I wrote two. I did Lucille Ball and I did Marsha P. Johnson. So I was pretty proud of it. And I actually wrote it before I wrote my Star Wars books, but it took a lot longer for it to come out. So it finally came out this year. I think because it was Kickstarter funded.
Yeah.
And it was also a lot of moving parts. But yeah, so the other three books you can definitely get at any bookstore. If they don't have it, you can ask them to order it and they will. But the She Series book, I think you have to buy from her directly.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you. Are you on any social media for people to?
Yeah, I'm using Twitter less these days, hoping to get off it eventually. I hope it goes away forever, or gets fixed somehow. I'm on Blue Sky. I just joined Threads, and I'm Riley Silverman on most of them. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm TikTok. Yeah, I'm either Riley Silverman or Riley J. Silverman. So if you're on TikTok and you go to one and it's a bunch of old Yelp reviews, that's not me. But if you go to one that has pictures of me and Star Wars stuff, that's probably me. So
that's funny.
Yeah.
Yelp reviews.
Yeah. There was someone who. Her name was also Riley Silverman, and all her Twitter was repo like a bot. Like she would write a review on Yelp and it would get shared to her Twitter, and she would never actually use the Twitter. And I had reached out to her to see if I could have her Twitter handle when I legally changed my name, and she wouldn't let me have it because she didn't want to deal with trying to find her password. So I just became Riley J. Silverman on there, and that's when I was verified for a while. I had that. That's why I was verified, but now I'm not verified anymore, so you have to make sure it's me and not her you're following.
Oh, well, I have an extension on my browser that actually still shows the legacy verification, so you're still verified to me. Yeah.
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll tell you what it is if I find it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, listeners, you can find Star Wars Music Minute or me, Chrysanthi Tan, on some of the social medias. I used to say all of them, but now that there's like twice as many, it seems. Like I'm not on Blue Sky yet, I'm not on Threads yet, etc. But maybe one day it will be. So you could just look up Chrysanthi Tan or Star Wars Music Minute. Additionally, if you want to join my Discord server, you can become a patron at any level. And if you have a detailed question, you can leave me a voice message. I'll put a link in the show notes, or you can write me an email at podcast@starwarsmusicminute.com. I always appreciate the emails, even when they're like corrections or helping me with detail, like things that you think I might know but don't know, or if you're sharing resources. That's all. Yeah, I welcome it. So I appreciate all the listeners who have helped me with details in the past or sent me resources to use. And with that, I guess that's all I have for today. May the Force be with you, and thank you for listening to Star Wars Music Minute.